Thank you, Steph. Thanks for inviting us to talk about shrinking your lawn footprint. This is the fall edition of a talk we started developing in the spring, but we thought it would be great to help people get ready for the fall season and fielding all those questions that might be coming in about sustainable lawn care. So I'm Stacy Small-Lorenz, and I'm the statewide specialist for residential landscape ecology, and I'm here with Dave Clement. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm a state specialist in plant pathology, but do a little bit of ornamentals and turf and a little bit of everything. So it's a good topic to sort of get trained up on. This is a sort of train the trainer concept where I think a lot of master gardeners do field lawn questions and questions about, sustainability and shrinking their lawn. So yeah, we thought it'd be good for the fall.
That's great. And Dave is also the steward of the university system's oldest turfgrass plots.
Oh
Isn't
yeah,
that what you were telling me?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How old are those turfgrass plots?
They're about 25 years old.
25 years of experience in turfgrass maintenance. Okay. This is so great to be here with you
Yeah.
today. All right. We're gonna that slide if it will let me. Okay. So we want to take a moment to remind everyone that university programs, activities, and facilities are available to all without regard to race, color, sex, gender, identity, or expression, sexual orientation, marital status, age, national origin, political affiliation, physical or mental disability, religion, protected veteran status, genetic information, personal appearance, or any other legally protected class. You are welcome here, and we're glad that you've joined us today.
Stacy, on that note, I'm going to launch the demographics poll because I think most folks have joined at this point, so we can collect that. Folks, this is the
Okay.
same demographic information that you collect when you give a presentation, just so when we report annually to our federal funders, they know that our programs are truly open to all. This is kind of the proof showing them that we are making our programs accessible. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen. Once you take a moment to complete it and hit submit, then it will go away from your screen. Thank you.
Thanks for providing that, Steph. Um, and I just want to mention that we have a whole section on shrinking your lawn footprint in the new Maryland Living Landscapes metric. If you're involved in Baywise, you've seen this. You're probably already using it this summer. This is our pilot season. This also has some resources in it. It's available online. If you just Google Maryland Living Landscapes metric, it will come right up. But a lot of what we're covering tonight is from the new Shrink Your Lawn Footprint section, but we've tweaked it to really be focusing on some fall topics. I'm going to use the clicker to advance. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry. It took us away from where we wanted to be. Okay, let's take a minute to go over our learning objectives for
Yeah.
today. Okay, so I think why don't I cover part of it and you cover the other part of it here. So like Dave said, this is a train the trainer scenario. So you should be able to teach Maryland residents how that can reduce the environmental impact of their lawn through several low cost, low effort actions. Should I
So
just share some?
so in Maryland, we do have the Maryland fertilizer law, and I think we have a few slides on that. So we'll go over that a little bit because that does give us some guidelines as to when we should be fertilizing or not fertilizing. We want to also reduce fertilizer and herbicide, fungicide inputs where we can, because that does lead to increased runoff into the bay, and it's going to affect our water quality. So it's important that we do it correctly and at the right time. And then mowing and maintenance, that is probably 80% of lawn care is just, the maintenance part and dealing with, just the normal things that you should be doing on a turf. And that involves selecting the right grasses. That involves maybe reducing some of the total lawn area and so forth, where it's not appropriate to even have grass. So those are all good things that we sort of, are going to talk about, I think.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about considerations for increasing, enhancing, protecting the biodiversity in your lawn, so practicing good stewardship of ground nesting bees, being aware of some of the invertebrate species that could be using healthy lawns. We'll talk about the benefits of core aerating occasionally, when that would be appropriate, and some of nature's alternatives to mechanical core aeration. We'll suggest a few low maintenance turfgrass alternatives that you should be able to share with the public. How to manage leaf litter for maximum lawn and environmental benefit, and explain what it means to water wisely in the context of sustainable lawn care. So this is just to show you a screenshot of the Shrink Your Lawn footprint section. It's now habit 6 in our Maryland Living Landscapes metric, but there's a nice checklist and then handy links that will take you right to things like the Maryland fertilizer law, some core aeration tips, and some different strategies for sustainable lawn care. We'll share some other resources at the end of the presentation as well. And there's an amazing section in the Maryland Master Gardener Handbook, the new Master Gardener Handbook, really great turfgrass section.
Yep.
So be sure to refer back to that as well. All right, so let's do a quick warm up. We're going to use the chat box. We're going to do this as a waterfall activity. With the waterfall activity, you're going to type your 3 words or less. Don't hit enter until we say go. So take a moment to think about it. But in 3 words or less, what does it mean to you to shrink your lawn footprint? So we're going to type it and just wait a moment before you enter your response. So this is just a short answer. So we give everyone a minute to think about what that might mean to you. Okay, so if you are ready, go ahead and hit enter and share your response. Oh, wow, we're getting lots of answers coming in. Increase biodiversity, reduce work, sustainability, smaller lawns, plants other than grass, greenhouse flowers. Okay, more biodiversity, add green mulch, protect nature, improved habitat, plant pollinator friendly ground cover. That's more than 3 words, but those are really great words. Slow water runoff. Thank you. Limit water overuse, not all grass. Okay, we're going to be talking
We're
about
talking about all
of
those
these
things.
things and more.
How about
Thank
that?
you. Okay, so we know we have a lot of knowledge already in our audience. So this is really about how do we talk about these things, and we're going to hear some stories and also get some real technical expertise here with Dave. So when we're talking about shrink your lawn footprint, we're basically talking about managing lawns in ways that reduce their negative impact on our waterways and maximize the ecological function and biodiversity of your residential landscape. Do you have anything that you would add to that, Dave?
No, that's a good.
Is that okay? Working definition?
And these are probably if we're going to go over this in the context of you answering maybe clients questions and things like that. So again, sort of incorporating all these things into best management practices.
Yeah, great. So what does sustainable lawn care look like? It might look like healthy lawns with less inputs.
Yeah.
Dumping less water and chemicals and fertilizer and burning less fossil fuels. What else might sustainable lawn care look
one
like?
of the things that I think people, grasslands ecologically are some of the best, biodiverse areas around the globe.
Yeah.
And so when we sort of shrink that down into our own landscapes, it just means that we don't always have to have a golf course, or a athletic turf, to have a successful lawn. I think that's what people maybe in the back of their minds sort of miss that point that, turf has a very, good purpose in our landscapes in that it protects soil, right? And it protects some of the plants that are even around, our landscapes and so forth. And it protects soil erosion, and it sort of increases a whole bunch of things like biodiversity and things like that. So again, sustainable lawn care doesn't have to be a perfect lawn. It just has to be, a utilitarian, area that basically serves a lot of these purposes.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have to be looking at it like a green shag carpet extension of our living room, but
Yeah.
more as a living ecosystem. And that's one thing one goal of mine is to help to teach Marylanders how to see and care for their lawn as a living
Yeah.
ecosystem, right? With higher species diversity, better water gas exchange, better water infiltration, and less polluted runoff. So that might look like a lot of different things. You might interplant native plants or have some no-mow areas. We're going to give some examples of alternatives or different ways to look at the lawn and manage it as an ecosystem. But it really all starts with the soil. And like Dave was saying, grasslands are extremely diverse ecosystems. Well, they also tend to occur in areas with extremely rich soil, high soil organic matter, deep soil organic matter. And we know that that organic matter, it influences the biological, the physical, the chemical properties of your soil. But when we think about our lawn, we need to think about what's under what's under the grass, like what's going on underground in the soil. Do we have a healthy living community of microorganisms, insects, plant roots, fungi? And then that non-living component of the organic matter is made up of dead microorganisms, plant matter. They all release nutrients to our plants. A lot of our suburban soils and our urban soils are pretty stripped down to that mineral layer because
Yeah.
that's the layer that's really great for building, for engineering, roads, buildings, and a lot of that topsoil has been moved, replaced, or compromised. And so a lot of times we're working with soils that are much higher in the mineral composition.
This is especially true in newer neighborhoods where you've got new construction or you're in, commercial areas or, areas where the soil hasn't really been treated very nicely. So you start right off with soil compaction. Soil compaction is one of the biggest things, that really limits anything that you put into a new landscape. So especially with turf, just like anything else, we're not digging a hole, which is the problem. We're not actually breaking through the layers that are created sometimes. When you're putting in trees and shrubs and so forth, you're actually at least breaking up some of that soil a little bit. But with turf, if you just, if you have soil compaction, you're going to have erosion problems. You're going to have layers of soil that are not compatible sometimes. You're going to have organic layers that are buried or, fine silt, sort of capping layers over, coarser layers, which is going to cause sheet erosion. So you have all of these things plus less organic matter. So just what we described before was the ideal thing. Now you're dealing with reality.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's important, like if before dumping a whole lot more water, fertilizer,
Yeah.
chemicals on it to sort of assess what's going on with the soil and what sort of challenges might that resident be facing. Just going back to this one, I really love this diagram and it shows how really a healthy loam soil is about 5% organic matter. Almost 50% of that loam is going to be air and water. And that's really important for that soil porosity for plant roots to get in and access oxygen, access water. So when you have compaction, you lose that soil porosity and the ability of the water to infiltrate. Then about 45% of loam soil is going to be made up of some kind of mineral composition. But it's that organic layer in that soil porosity that we're often missing in suburban and urban landscapes. So there are ways to begin to restore that soil organic matter and build it back up. And one of the reasons, in terms of water quality and stormwater runoff, that we need to think about soil organic matter is that it retains a lot of water. And I find this statistic just really stunning from USDA that 1% of soil organic matter in the top 6 inches of the soil will hold 27,000 gallons of water in an acre. That's a lot of
That's
water storage capacity. Now,
And
yeah,
turf is and grass in general, any kind of grassland or, if you look, in nature, creates its own organic matter in a way. So again, that's why we talk about organic matter, and the turf and grasslands are actually adding organic matter to their system, as well as, so we don't want to remove, grass clippers. We don't want to remove all the leaves. We want to increase, that organic matter as much as we can where possible,
Yeah.
and sort of maintain that, organic matter and protect it.
So we're looking at some different options here. I've got my worm bin going, and this is like, just a convenient way to create compost using worms, vermicomposting, grass cycling and leaf cycling, and then making use of arborist wood chips for pathways, mulching, different ways to use organic matter to begin to rebuild that topsoil, and restore that water storage capacity. It's also great for your plants. So this is just taking a look at the soil horizons. It's good to just have an understanding of the cross section of the soil. That upper layer, that's the organic layer, the O layer. And that A layer, that's really where you've got your nice rich topsoil. You may also have a B layer, especially if it's a grassland or a turf grass, that lower horizon. And then the C layer, that's the more, that's nearest to the rock parent material. But a lot of times it's that A and B layer that's really disturbed in a developed landscape, in a
Well,
residential landscape.
that's what gets destroyed in any
Yeah.
kind of construction and sort of, housing developments and things. So that's what you're battling against.
I'll show you one of my turf replacement projects, and I realize now that's what I was battling with when I was first just trying to plant directly into the soil without any soil amendment. I was just dealing with pure clay, mineral soil, and really getting nowhere. And once I understood that's what I was dealing with, I was able to make better progress.
Turf is tough, but it's a lot harder to grow turf,
Yeah.
in poor soil.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then if you compare grassland and forest soils, grasslands, you may even have an A1 and A2, really deep, rich organic soil, topsoil layers, compared to areas under forest vegetation. So you also have to think about what's the history of the land use, where you're trying to grow a lawn or where you're trying to garden. Was it once a forest? You may have already had a naturally thin topsoil layer. So just kind of being aware of all of these different soil factors can really help you understand what you're dealing with. So what we want to strive for overall is greater lawn biodiversity. And we just wanted to share some examples with you of some of the vertebrates and invertebrates that actually can use lawns as, a component of their habitat. We have the American robin foraging, chipping sparrows, which actually nest in grass and will use lawns, and like open woodland areas for nesting. And then eastern bluebirds have a really neat hawking foraging strategy where they pounce on insects in grasslands. So you will often see eastern bluebirds in areas that have scattered trees and lawn. And if you're actually allowing more biodiversity in, allowing more insects to coexist in your lawn, you're actually providing foraging opportunities for all of these species. And then I have a monarch here that I photographed on one of Dave's turfgrass plots, just stopping over to visit some of the clover in the turfgrass plots.
So again, these aren't perfect lawns. So
Yeah,
this is a lawn that
yep.
basically is a normal, ground cover that most people are going to be dealing with. So again, preserving, these things, and not having a perfectly weed-free lawn or insect-free lawn. We get a lot of questions sometimes of, how do I kill,
Mhm.
my insects or something like that. We're going to go over a few of them, some or other arachnid arthropods, but again, it's sort of, all of these things are taking advantage of the natural ecology there.
Yeah, so whatever we can do to really increase that
Yeah,
biodiversity and that complexity of the lawn ecosystem, sometimes a less than perfect lawn
yeah,
is better
it's fine.
when you're
It's
thinking
fine.
about it in terms of
It's better.
habitat.
Yeah. And again, here are some. This gets confusing because some people think this webbing here is actually, fungal or disease, when in fact it's, they're spiders. And you can have lots of these things, this time of year. If you just go out maybe in the morning and see the dew on these, it makes them visible. But think of all of the benefits that you're getting here with spiders, just, in a small area sometimes, all the predation, all of the other things that you're taking advantage of, and the ecological, benefits.
Yeah, so like think about this as like nature's pest control, but if we're spraying for insects,
Right.
we're also taking the spiders out, we're taking out that prey base for all of the birds, including migratory songbirds. Um, so really encouraging to people to think about the spiders as part of that natural pest control system. And also, I think this is a good case for mowing high and leaving the grass
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah.
We talk about that in terms of grass health,
Mhm.
but it also, again, becomes a component of
That helps.
the ecosystem. So this question might come up, do we really need to fertilize our lawns? I know some people just don't do it, but there might be an argument for fertilizing for sustainable,
So this would be
sustainable
a
lawn
question
care.
that I think many master gardeners will have to deal with from the clientele and so forth, right? So they have a turf that kind of is maybe half weeds, half turf. It has a lot of bare spots. So the minute you have thin areas and bare spots, eventually you're going to have erosion. You're going to have, a degrading of that soil, no matter how good or poor it is. And so, intelligent fertilization actually can add, better coverage of that area, and that's the whole idea of a utilitarian lawn is to actually keep the soil covered, keep erosion to a minimum, increase your plant density so that you aren't going to get these erosion events with heavy rainfalls and things like that, and in the same time having more plant material there that's desirable is also going to increase soil organic matter.
Yeah, and there's some strategic timing here. So we're talking
Yes.
about fall.
So
What would you do in the fall for
fall
fertilizer?
is our best time for our cool season grasses. Now, if you're growing Bermuda zoysia, it's a little bit different, but if you're growing the traditional, cool season grasses like your fescues or bluegrass or something like that, this is the time of year when the grass naturally wants to, increase root mass, increase root depth, increase root density. And so this is why we stress fall as the best time probably to actually do some of these choices. And a good soil test, of course, is going to lead you one way or another. But the nitrogen in the fertilization, whether it's organic or conventional or whatever, tends to replace, what's happened during the summer, repair some of the damage maybe that occurred, and actually increase the root density, and also increase, the color and the density of the turf, which is going to help everything.
So some of the circumstances in which you might want to consider fertilizing, and if you're only going to do it once in a year,
Yeah, do it in the
do it in
fall.
the fall,
Yeah.
but don't wait till late fall, right?
Mhm.
We want to do it a little earlier in the
So
fall.
the little caveat is that an organic source of nitrogen, let's say an organic, fertilizer that you may apply, is going to require the warmth to break it down because that's a microorganism degradation. So don't wait until November, to put something like that down. Really, the earlier you can do it, like in this month, September, is really the best time to actually get an organic type of fertilizer in the ground because then, it can be broken down by the beneficial microorganisms and things like that. No matter what it is, if it's an organic source, I would suggest getting it down early.
So if a client were going to opt for an inorganic fertilizer, then
Well, they have a
they
lot
might
have more choice.
they
Yeah,
have more choice. They might be able to push it later in the fall.
right.
But if you're using the organic fertilizer, the basic point is to give it time to break down for
That's true.
that biological action to
Yes.
take place. Let's go back a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about highlights in the Maryland fertilizer law, especially as they pertain to the fall. So let's talk about that blackout period first.
Right. So
What is that?
we can't fertilize after November 15th. Okay. So that's sort of your cutoff point. So if you want to put down your fertilizer, and like we just explained, so get it down, I would say in September, October. That's really the best time to do it. If you push it later, it can work, but it's not the same as getting it down earlier. So you can't put it down after the 15th, and you can't reapply until March 1st. And this is all caveats with like what happens in March. Like if you still have snow on the ground in March, you still can't fertilize.
Yeah.
So those are sort of like the window where we really don't want, and the reason we do that, obviously, is that it's frozen turf usually at that point, or it's cold turf that's not going to absorb the nutrients and it's going to run off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're that, part of what we're trying to address here is reducing that amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that's polluting Chesapeake Bay. Those are two of the biggest pollutants to the bay, causing all kinds of wreaking ecological havoc on the bay and the various life forms that depend on it. So we're trying to address that in terms of reducing excessive needless fertilizing in times that is likely to run off.
And please don't use it as a de-icing product. Yeah.
Yeah, it was shocking to me to
that's
find out that
that's
people even do that, but I guess that is something that people try.
because that just is straight runoff.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So also, we can't apply fertilizer with phosphorus
unless it's a soil test tells us. So
unless it's absolutely necessary, right? We've got
yeah, and
evidence for that.
that's actually good practice because most lawns really don't need the phosphorus levels that we used to put on in the past. So
And then also not applying it right before a heavy rain and keeping it out of the waterways. So there's actually a buffer zone delineated
right.
um, keep it over 15 feet from waterways. Now, this is interesting. I'll show an example of an intermittent waterway. You might not live right on a creek or right on a river or right on the bay, but you might have a drainage swale that runs across your property. That is considered a waterway. So even if that water is only running through intermittently, the important thing is that people are talking to their lawn care professionals. If they're not doing it themselves, they need to be sure to be communicating these practices to lawn care professionals and making sure that anybody that is applying fertilizer is applying it. It's actually the homeowner's responsibility to make sure that the lawn care company is
I mean, they should be
following
trained, but
these
it's
laws.
not, but it's much better to be on top of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about this. You mentioned the timing of fertilizing, and we've got
So
cool
really, it's
season
it's now.
grasses.
Yeah, it's really now. This is the best utilization of nutrients when the soil's still warm. The roots are growing. Well, eventually they'll be growing if we get some rain. But when we get this period in the fall where the plant wants to put on new growth, wants to increase its root density and so forth, this is when it's going to absorb the nutrients the best.
And these grasses that are highlighted in blue here are the cool season grasses. That means they're growing in the spring or the fall.
Yeah.
So we've got tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, fine fescue. These other two, zoysia grass and Bermuda grass, those are warm season grasses. They're going to be growing in the summer months. But these cool season grasses, um, you were telling me tall fescue is really the best suited
So
for
yeah,
Maryland climates.
for Maryland, if you for most residential lawns, really everything should revolve around tall fescue. Even if the person doesn't know what kind of lawn they have, they typically will have tall fescue as a major component. And any new lawns going in will have tall fescue probably as a major component. Um, Bluegrass is thrown in sometimes, as a knitting grass. It's a rhizomatous grass, so it actually knits things together. So if you buy sod, for example, you're going to get Kentucky bluegrass with that sod simply because it knits it together a little bit. Or it's a nice grass that repairs itself a little bit better. The fine fescues are one of our best fescues or best turf grass choices for the no-mow areas, for the areas where you don't want to maintain, a typical lawn. Let's say you want to let it grow or take over and get, more natural. They take the lower nutrients. They don't really like traffic, so they're not going to be good for a play area, but they're great for the areas where you want to reconvert maybe into more of a natural, area or native area.
And I think one of the key takeaways here is that people need to know what type of grass that they're growing. And are they growing grass that's appropriate for Maryland, that's appropriate for their geography, even the region of Maryland that they live in. So that's the first thing. And then the second, know the growing season. And that's when you should be fertilizing. Really should only be fertilizing when the
When
plant
it's
is
active.
actively growing. So that's why it's really essential to know, like,
Yeah.
what do you have growing there? When do you need to fertilize it? Okay, so we kind of already covered that, but do you want to point out this information on the bag that they can be looking for that we've got circled here?
Yeah, again, people will, if you're advising clients or advising people asking questions, just getting them to having, knowing the order NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You really shouldn't be putting down any phosphorus for the most part. And then also, there's some little fine print in there as to the amount of slow release, that nitrogen is. So again, organic nitrogen is going to be slow release, but in a conventional fertilizer, it will list, for example, the amount of slow release. So when you try to aim for at least a third of that product or even greater, to be slow release. So that's an important component as well, just to get them, putting down the right kind of fertilizer, without the extra phosphorus.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. That's fascinating. So basically, this is one of the Baywise actions, and that's minimizing routine applications of fungicide, herbicide, and/or insecticide. And so by knowing the right timing, the right amount, the right type, we can reduce some of that excess application.
And that's one of the advantages of growing, either the tall fescue or the fine fescue. They require fewer of these things, right? So they're not going to require fungicides or insecticides for the most part. The the insects damage and the disease damage is going to be minimal, and then you're left with weeds.
And we want to bring your attention to this extension fact sheet, the turfgrass technical update. And that's a really great resource for sort of keeping abreast of the latest on turfgrass and what's growing well in Maryland and what is advised in terms of seed mixes and where you are, your microclimate, etc. So we just dropped that link in the chat box. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else to add to that?
No, that's good.
Okay. What about herbicides? Are they really necessary?
So, well, herbicides, again, this is sort of your choice as to how, I guess, pretty you want your lawn. There are some weeds that will compete with turf and outcompete turf. In those cases, you can use a herbicide sparingly. We did a little bit of research with this latest product. This is an organic product that's approved even in Montgomery County. It's an iron product. So it's an iron chelate, and it actually then is when you spray it on the leaves, it actually dries the leaves up. It actually desiccates them. So it doesn't kill the roots necessarily all in one shot like that, but it does have a good effect as far as reducing weed competition in some cases, and then also adding a little bit of a nutrient which actually greens the turf up. It actually makes it look greener after you spray it. So we've had some experience now with this off and on over the last couple of years, and it's a nice product. It's safe for pets and people. Uh, and it doesn't kill turf. It kills broadleaf weeds. So again, there's sort of the caveat. It won't kill some of the grassy weeds, but it will it will do a pretty good job on things that are, broadleaf like dandelions or, broadleaf plantain or something like that, or burdock or something that you have, in that area. And so again, it's a nice alternative to a conventional herbicide where you're looking for, a little bit more safety.
Okay. I wanted to talk for a minute about Japanese stiltgrass. I don't know if anybody's seeing a lot of Japanese stiltgrass out there this year, but I feel like it's everywhere I go. And I have the feeling the lawn care companies are bringing it into our neighborhood because I've been dealing with big patches of Japanese stiltgrass popping up. So this is one that, oh yeah, so Charlotte's like so much. Yeah, I've been seeing it in so many natural areas too. It's just really getting around. So this is one that it's relatively easy to hand pull. You can take out big clumps of it by the roots, like really, really fast. So this is some of my Japanese stiltgrass that I've been pulling on the right here, and it's growing in the shady areas, the sunny areas, but I do think it's coming in through this drainage swale. It's coming from other yards, and it's probably just being spread around by lawn care companies. So
It's
yeah,
spread by wildlife
it's
too.
also spread by wildlife,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So,
But I think one of the important things with this for mechanical removal for pulling it is making sure you're getting on top of it before it goes to seed. So basically, it's just work on a patch at a time and hand pull and just try to get on top of it before it reseeds and spreads. Anything else about Japanese stokas? I mean, I know there are some herbicides that are indicated for it, but this is one that is really not that hard to pull.
yeah, this one is more of a mechanical thing. Unfortunately, the iron will not control this one. So again, it's more for the broadleaf. So either using, hand pulling or if you have a big area, maybe smothering it and, planting through the mulch or something like that. But these seeds will last for several seasons. So don't let it go to seed if you can.
So Sierra says, I wish deer liked it. And Renee says it spreads seed when pulled. Right. So
Yes.
that's why getting on top of it before it goes to seed is so, so important. Oh, and there was a question before we go on to grubs. There was a question about nut sedge. Do you have any tips on removing nut sedge? Is it a real problem?
Nut
And
sedge can be a problem.
okay,
Uh,
let's talk
and
about nut sedge for a minute.
and nut sedge is not everywhere. It tends to grow in areas, like your swale, which has, intermittent water. It likes moisture. The problem with nut sedge is that it's easy to pull, and people are very happy when they pull it, but then they leave behind all the little nuts or the little propagules.
Okay.
So again, over time you could hand pull it, but that is one you might have to use a herbicide on if you have a bad problem with it. So it's one of the it's probably worldwide one of the toughest weeds, as far as, agriculture as well as, other, ornamental areas and so forth to deal with. And it's not technically a grass, it's a sedge. So, it does have a different biology. And so our herbicides really are limited as far as most herbicides don't control it.
How do we know we have a nut sedge versus some other kind of sedge that might be a
Well,
beneficial
you're
sedge?
you're the expert. You have to you have
Yeah.
to twist it in your hand and
Yeah.
find that triangle. But then yeah, I
Yeah.
mean you'd have to let it flower
Yeah. Yeah.
probably.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about
Well,
grubs.
this gets a lot of mileage, and it really is overhyped, I think, in many cases. This is how commercial lawn care companies, sell their services sometimes is to, they're gonna prevent grub damage. Well, grub damage really isn't a problem if you're growing the two grasses that we just mentioned.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
they're,
The tall
if we're
fescue.
growing tall fescue and five fescue, we're not going to have, the types of grub damage that you would on another type of turf, let's say ryegrass or bluegrass. Um, so again, that's the number one bullet there. Select a tolerant grass. Again, diversity and so forth, and you know, periods where you actually let the lawn dry down is detrimental to grub survival. So when we have dry soils or we have dry spells, if you're not irrigating, you're actually killing grubs. Grubs do require about a regular irrigation, or either from natural rainfall or from artificial to actually hatch and grow. So any kind of lower maintenance as far as irrigation goes helps control grubs. And then there are natural predators from grubs. So we've got the skunk up there.
And
And
firefly
we've got
firefly
firefly larvae
larvae,
and
they
stuff
love
like that.
grubs.
So there are things and nematodes are in the soil that actually will, attack grub species. It's also important to probably realize that again, turf will recover to a certain extent from grub damage if it's the right kind of turf. So, oh yeah, there you go. You have your little mole there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So again, a lot of times it is a matter of allowing more biodiversity,
yeah.
supporting that natural food web, learning to coexist with other life forms, learning to coexist with other mammals, and also creating conditions for our overwintering insects like our firefly larvae that, or allowing the spiders to
Actually,
peacefully
spiders
coexist.
spiders will actually take out some of the small things. Yeah, like
Yeah. Oh, and there are the
that.
nematodes. Yeah. Yeah.
Those.
So if you want to actually get into lawn removal, and or you have clients that are interested in lawn alternatives, it might be a matter of replacing sections of turf grass, with native plant alternatives. So there are some strategies for thinking through where you want to do that, how you can do that to your best advantage. I'm just giving some examples here of some turf replacement. This is one of our Baywise sites in Cumberland. This is the Emmanuel Episcopal Church. They converted their entire lawn to a pollinator planting. And you can actually see some of the blooming, and it was just gorgeous this summer. So I went up and visited it. It was really, really impressive. But they made a commitment to be stewards of the native biodiversity in their community. I have another example here where I decided I wanted to try to replace turf grass in I talked a little bit about my swale, my drainage swale. This is water from other properties that runs across our property. It's designed that way. This is the drainage system in our neighborhood, and that water drains directly into the creek. So I thought we could do a little better than just turf grass by planting native sedges, native rushes, and then I packed as many bee specialist plants I could in along the banks of the swale. So this was just this spring. I just planted it. I just started the turf removal last fall. And this spring, this is what I had coming up. So those areas we've talked about that are hard to mow, that it's real pain to mow this swale,
Right. So there are some areas
Um,
where you don't need turf.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, where you could do better and then
Steep
not have to,
slopes and swales and things like that, right?
you know.
Or shade areas, there are areas that really could benefit from other kinds of plants.
So for me, this was the logical place to start replacing the turf. Is the area that
Yeah.
we don't really enjoy mowing anyways. And then we can get a lot more water filtration, slow that stormwater down, give it a chance to percolate. Um, Guess what? The plants love it. And I haven't used any municipal water at all on this planting. And so other examples of green mulch options, ground covers, lawn alternatives, ferns, mosses, bunch
You'll
grasses.
get this question quite a lot from clients where they have a shady area, or if they have an area underneath trees and they have tree roots, for example, and things like that. Those are not ideal places for turf.
Mhm.
And so again, maximizing your biodiversity by incorporating some of these other plants in those areas is really a smart thing to do.
It's difficult to mow. It's not ideal for
Right.
grass because grass really generally wants open,
Yeah,
sunny areas.
exactly.
So these are areas that you could target for fern beds, mosses, native sedges, some spring ephemerals, lots of great options.
So the alternative, if you do have bare spots, is again, you're not protecting your soil. So you really want to have coverage here with plants, plant material. Otherwise, it turns into a weedy area or it turns into an area that erodes. Putting in plants really is the answer.
Yeah, I love that as a strategy. And so here are some examples that I collected at Silburn Arboretum, different places where uh, they have lawn alternative demonstrations. They've got some native bunch grasses, fern plantings. This is a really beautiful rain garden that's it's attached to a drainage swale. But this is an area that our master gardeners maintain, our Baywise master gardeners from Baltimore City. So just some nice examples of what they're doing there. They still have plenty of lawn, but they've got lots of examples of nice lawn alternatives now. So there are a couple of ways to approach this. You might highlight those, start on focusing on those areas that are difficult to maintain, difficult to grow grass. They might be rocky, they might be wet, and they might be shady. And then decide which high use lawn areas you want to keep and for what purpose.
Right.
And then, yeah,
I mean, lawns can have then a purpose. They don't necessarily have to always be there to just have soil coverage. So you can have, a lawn area for recreation or, just aesthetics looks even. But, these other areas that really aren't best for turf, then let's convert them, to, a better situation or better choice.
look at how much more diversity, habitat layers, we can already be creating here, but they still have lawn that they can
Yeah.
use and enjoy, and then maintain it well, you know. So I just wanted to show a few steps in my lawn conversion project. I had tried planting right into the turf grass, and for a couple of seasons, like a few years, like nothing would happen, nothing would take, it wouldn't survive. I was planting into mineral soil. The deer ate everything. I was so frustrated. And then I decided to get serious about the lawn conversion. I used some of this paper landscape fabric, put it down. I started with bricks or rocks, and then I got some landscape staples to hold it down. And then this was just last fall. I started planting right into the paper landscape fabric. Then in the center picture, you can see where I added a double layer of coir fabric. So it's not as densely knitted as burlap. It's a very loose weave, but you can see the stormwater running through the drainage swale in a heavy rain event. And that's not even a flood event. That's just how much water is running through there. So the picture on the right is the next spring. That's this spring. That's already some of the wood sedge, the juncus, the native plants, the forbs that I put in already coming up in the spring. I've been really happy with the success of the wood sedge or the pretty sedge. This is one that did really well on the Mount Cuba sedge trials. It's very flexible. It tolerates sunlight, shade, wet, dry conditions. So I wanted something that was going to do well.
And it's deer resistant.
And it's deer resistant. Don't you love that? But I wanted something that was going to do well under really, really wet conditions and be able to be submerged, but also drought periods like we're experiencing right now. So this was the sedge that had the widest range of moisture tolerance, light tolerance, and was deer resistant. And it's just doing really well. But this is that same drainage swale right there that you saw covered in paper landscape fabric just last fall. This is spring. I feel like I'm doing a lot better now. So really getting serious about like the lawn conversion and the timing. So fall planting, this is a great time if you
Yes.
want to try a lawn conversion experiment, take a small patch, get serious, get that paper landscape fabric. We've got a few different turf removal methods we'll share. It's a great time for fall planting. It gives those native plants a chance to set and be ready for spring. So these are all plants that just came up this season in that same drainage swale planting. I've got spring on the left, midsummer in the center, and then this is just yesterday, some of my New England asters. So I got so excited about that wood sedge, Dave, and I decided we wanted to convert some of the turfgrass plot and see how we could do with a larger, denser planting of the wood sedge and look at it in terms of a potential lawn alternative. So we're looking at different soil amendments, uh, trying different combinations of leaf grow and biochar, seeing how the different plots do, and how well will it tolerate mowing. So we'll look at maybe an annual mowing regime. But it's just have a demonstration of what you can do in terms of, lawn alternatives. If you still want something that's lawn-like,
Mhm.
but doesn't require the constant mowing, fertilizing, watering. This, we are watering it with a soaker hose to get it through the drought periods, but it's done stunningly well. And I got a late start on planting it just because it took a while to find it in my schedule. But ended up planting in July. I don't recommend planting in July, but it's doing great. The sedges are doing great. So now would be the perfect time if you
We
want to
have
do some sedge planting.
and we have some sedges from last year that
Hmm.
didn't get watered at all this year because
Oh,
they were
yeah.
established.
Yeah.
So again, the fall is a great time for establishment. So these are pretty tough plants, and I think in a lot of areas they could be used as a sort of a nice, alternative.
Yeah. And they have a lot more biodiversity value. There are butterflies, moths that will lay their eggs in sedges. There are birds that nest in sedges. Common yellowthroats love nesting in sedges. So you can really boost your biodiversity, incorporating sedges into your plantings or even as, a full lawn alternative. I want to thank, by the way, the master gardeners that volunteered and came out. I put out a call to our Baywise master volunteers, and we got these sedges, 96 sedges planted within 3 days, fully mulched. So if you were there, thank you so much. And I'm sure there will be more volunteer opportunities. This is right here at our SEMRIC Research and Education Center. So I just want to share this. This is actually something that Steph put together. We did a Getting Started with Natives class, and Steph put the slide together. Different ways to remove lawn. So there's a solarization method, the lasagna garden method, and then slicing, and loosening the turf. I feel like that's the hardest one. Times that I've tried to just cut out turf and dig it up, that's a lot of hard labor. Solarization, it's easier, but can have an impact on your soil biodiversity. I like the lasagna garden method. I didn't even use cardboard. I used the paper landscape fabric because it was really flexible, and I was trying to wrap it around that bioswale, and that culvert. And so the paper worked really well for me. Not everybody loves it, but I put that coir fabric right on top of it and then let the leaf litter kind of accumulate in there, and it did really, really well. Do you have any thoughts on turf removal or what you've had success with,
I think
Dave?
you highlighted that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's whatever really works in the area that But again, removal of turf is tough because it has a root zone. It has a good roots. And so
Yeah.
yeah, you're substituting now, a different kind of plant material in that area. And again, your goal is to get, root colonization and root growth into that area.
And I'll say I've still had to hand weed because I did have some Bermuda grass pop up, some Japanese
Yeah,
steelgrass
you're gonna
pop
have
up.
sure.
At that point, I had so many natives in there, I couldn't mow or anything. So just expect to do a little bit of hand weeding. And I also found if you get some of those landscape staples instead of rocks or stakes that can be really hard to work with, just those landscape fabric staples, you just tap them right into the soil to tack your paper or your cardboard down. It works like a dream. And then that cardboard or that paper will just break down. So what about clover? It feels like sometimes people are at war with clover. They always want to get rid of the clover. Clover was not always considered a weed.
Right. Yeah, it used to be that we actually included clover in the grass seed mixes. So on the left, it's kind of a 100% clover. On the right, there's a little better mix. So
Too
again,
much clover.
um, if it's 100% clover, you're not going to get soil protection in the winter. The clover does die down. So you do want some turf or other plants, with the clover. But the clover does add to the biodiversity. It does add to the, attractiveness of pollinators and things like that. So they actually do sell a micro clover that you can use with, grass seed that's a little less competitive, but even regular clover is fine. I just wouldn't let it get, over like 50% because after that, then it becomes more dominant and you don't have the coverage in the wintertime.
And I wanted to point out this butterfly photo, this fritillary, variegated fritillary, that's out on Dave's turfgrass plots. There have been so countless butterflies, so many different checkered skippers, monarchs, fritillaries, so many I can't even begin to name them using the clover in that turfgrass. So again, if you can,
Yeah, you don't have to have a perfect lawn.
yeah,
That's the thing. All right.
yeah, if you can stand a little clover, it can actually, be a biodiversity enhancer. And this is micro clover in this right picture. So it's less,
It's a little smaller.
yeah, it's a little smaller in stature, less shade. It's not going to shade your grass out nearly as much. There was a good question up there, so I'm going to leave this interplanting picture asking if the landscape fabric breaks down. So I did not use plastic landscape fabric, and the solarization example that was given, you would definitely want to pull that back up. You don't want to leave that in there to get embedded. It's a nightmare. So that's a temporary, if you use that like plastic landscape fabric, that's a temporary solution. The paper landscape fabric, I ended up pulling it up just because it was after a while. I wanted to go with the coir fabric, but it did a good job of killing it initially, and the coir fabric just took over in the winter. And then my natives came up so fast that they kind of took over. But you don't ever want to leave that plastic landscape fabric down because it really interferes with the water and oxygen exchange, and the roots get embedded. And then it's a real problem trying to get it out. I've dealt with some of that was left over from the previous homeowners in our place, and it's a mess.
So this is an example up at Longwood Gardens, for example, where they're just showing you different ideas of how you can interplant and how different kinds of grasses you can use. Some of these are the fine fescues, for example, that you don't have to mow. And you can leave you can intersperse this happened to be in the springtime, so there are bulbs, but you can plant obviously some other perennials that go through the season.
Mhm. I love this.
Yeah.
So different ways you could just, work your plantings right into the grasses. Let's talk just a little bit about electric lawn equipment, and there's some movement towards electric lawn equipment. I personally, we enjoy it and prefer it. It's quieter, it's lighter, but it's a great way to reduce your fossil fuel emissions. Lawn equipment is actually a significant contributor to fossil fuels that greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that are contributing to climate change. So you have
Yeah,
share
well,
some tips
well, these are
on making
becoming
that switch?
uh they're just as expensive,
That's
the equipment. But anyway, the it's becoming more and more available. The thing you do have to be aware of is just battery, maintenance and so forth, and maintaining batteries. So keeping batteries cool is the number one uh, caveat to that. So if you've used the battery and you've discharged it down to where the equipment stops, don't try to recharge that right away. Actually, let it cool back down to a room temperature or a more moderate temperature. Don't store batteries in the sun or in enclosed vehicles if you can, um, because and then of course you can have problems with hot batteries. So again, keeping them cool. Don't try to recharge them right away. Actually, have more than you need, or have several batteries, for example, to interchange, so you're not trying to sort of tax the power. That's not correct.
And it's convenient. The batteries tend to be interchangeable within a brand, so you
Yeah.
might want to consider that. Maybe find a brand you like. Start with a small tool, but then you can interchange those batteries. I love not having to haul gasoline around
Yeah.
and pour gasoline in my yard and smell it in the car, all of that. So yeah. What
And
about core aerating? What is the point and when
so
do
in the
we want to do
fall,
it?
right? So this is one of your only ways to really cultivate turf. You can't really till turf, you can't cultivate it. But this machine allows you to remove, discrete plugs out of the root zone. which then you can incorporate either organic matter into, or you can, even control weeds. It's great for overseeding when you have to overseed. So it allows seed to soil contact by getting the seed down into the actual soil. And so it's a good machine to actually rent. I wouldn't own one, for example, but you certainly they're available through all sorts of companies and places. So it's a heavy machine. It works. It's a good workout, but it will allow you to do some of these things that will give you that opportunity to add things to the turf.
And fall would be the time, right?
And fall is the best time.
All right, so it's another thing to put on your fall to-do list. And this is really like when you're trying to repair or reestablish a lawn. It's not something that needs to be done on a regular basis, right? If you've already got a
Oh,
healthy
right. If you already
lawn established, this is not like a routine thing.
You don't have to do it every year, but
Yeah,
certainly if you need to do something, this is the machine to actually, get the materials into the turf where it's needed.
I love it. I can't wait to try it. But let's talk about natural alternatives for aerating your lawn.
This is how nature does it.
This is how nature does it. So I showed you my bioswale planting. I'm so proud that in the spring, a colony of mining bees moved in and set up and dug their nests. And you only see them out active and flying around for about a couple of weeks. But I just want to point this out as a fall topic. These mining bees have now nested. They've laid their egg, and that larvae is going to be developing all throughout the fall and the winter and not emerging till next spring. So this is why we don't want to till our lawns if we care about biodiversity. And we also don't want people to be afraid of the mining bees. You may get calls and people want to get rid of the ground nesting bees. What do I do? And we just want to make the case for mining bees providing this ecosystem service of aerating the lawn. They're also really important pollinators for our native trees and shrubs. So there's only one bee in each hole. It's just a nest where there's little larvae down there developing. It's not a giant hive underground, and they shouldn't be confused with wasps. They're not aggressive. They rarely sting. And this is also a case for not always having a perfect lawn because they do like these areas that are sloped with a little bit of exposed soil. So they provide natural soil aeration. So we want to think also about our options when we're choosing grasses and encouraging folks to choose some of the more low maintenance grasses. So there might be that fine fescue or the tall fescue if you want to go with a turf grass, but there are some native options too that are really, really lovely.
And so these are becoming, well, it wasn't too long ago that you couldn't even find these. So now they're becoming a little bit more available. And I think as people request them, this is where we can make a difference. So you can certainly add these are very deep rooted grasses. They're bunch grasses. They're not going to make a good turf necessarily because you're going to let them grow up and seed head. But these are areas, I mean, these are plants that can be used in areas where you really want a more natural look or, to hold soil. They're great for holding soil on slopes and things like that. Actually, the bottle brush grass is the one grass that will grow in the shade very, very, very nicely. So again, for areas that you need specific plants for specific purposes, these are great plants to actually encourage. And again, it's that biodiversity and that ecosystem approach.
Yeah, yeah. And also this is another way of building up that soil organic matter because as those roots die back in the fall and the winter, they're contributing to the soil. Um, and it's just another great biodiversity factor. And they also improve water infiltration too with their deep root systems.
Hey friends, just doing a little time check. It's one.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, we're just going to go over mowing at just a few like mowing practices, and then I think that'll be about it. So,
Okay.
So again, mow high. This is the key. And a lot of lawnmowers actually don't go high enough. So encourage people to use the highest setting on their mower during the summertime. That really goes a long way to protecting the root growth because roots will sort of balance off with the height of the leaves. So if you mow short, you're going to have a shallower root system versus if you mow high, you're going to have a much deeper root system.
Mhm.
And that's sort of a good rule of thumb to go for. So I would say 3.5, 4 inches is great, for most of our summer. I wouldn't go lower than that during the summer. And again, if you're going to maintain the turf, with a mowed look, don't let it get too tall before remowing. Try to get it on a regular basis so that you don't remove, too much at one time or let, a lot of the grass clippings just lay there and sort of smother the grass. So don't mow when it's dormant. So right now, when we have no water, don't go out there and start mowing dry grass. The crowns of the grass are still alive, but by walking on them and running equipment over it and things like that, you're going to damage the crown. So you're actually going to kill grass in a sense. So
Mhm.
don't mow when it's dormant. And it's okay to let turf go dormant. That's another thing. Let turf go dormant, but don't go out there and try to mow it and, fertilize it and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Let it recover and then let it, actually, get some more moisture before you start doing some of these things.
And I want to mention the option of grass cycling. Make sure we highlight this.
Yes.
We did talk about manufactured fertilizers, but you might
Leave
encourage people
leave
to
your
practice
clippings.
grass
Yeah.
cycling and allow that grass to break down and build up that soil organic matter. And I know a lot of people talk to me about they don't even apply fertilizer; they just do the grass cycling, and it brings great results. So.
Yeah.
Um, and you may not realize this, but having a sharp mower blade is actually a component of sustainable lawn care. So, we're talking about every 10 hours of mowing. That's probably not happening in a lot of places. And you get these frayed brown grass tips. It's everywhere I go now and
Yeah.
check. Um, but this lends itself to disease and unhealthy grass, right? So,
Right, and the grass basically is bruised at that point, so you're letting other things happen. So this usually happens at best once a year, but really people probably should be doing it at least twice a year. And I actually before the fall, if you're overseeding and putting in young grass plants, it's better to cut them with a sharp blade. So get the
mhm.
get the blade sharpened at least before you cut the new grass that you've just put in.
Yep. Important tip. Okay, yeah. So if you see those frayed ends, which you're going to see everywhere now that you can't unsee it now that we've showed you, it's time to sharpen those mower blades. Okay, so I just want to talk for a moment about leaf cycling, and people might be asking what to do about leaves, and I'm hearing about leave the leaves, but is it going to kill my grass? So let's talk about briefly some options for leaving the leaves. There are different ways to go about this so that you can have your leaves and your lawn too.
So
Okay.
it really depends on some of the leaves, the species and so forth. So the finer, the smaller the leaves and so forth, they actually sort of nestle into the lawn just fine. Actually, mowing leaves when they're dry is a great way to just recycle, those nutrients. Where we run into problems, there's some of the larger leaves, like, your oaks, for example, that don't break down as quickly, or maybe some large maples or sycamores or something like that. But again, running over them with a lawnmower sometimes is all you need if it's dry enough. If it's not dry enough, or if you have too many, let's say you just have just mountains of leaves, then I think that's a great way to either, mulch in place, like, underneath the trunks or the trees, just the canopies of the trees themselves, just let those leaves there. Either rake them there or, move them there. Composting, that type of thing is also okay. But again, you're going to talk about why it's important to leave the leaves in some of your beds and so forth for the benefits of a lot of our pollinator species and things like that. That's an overwintering place for them.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing solution. So you can rake whole leaves into your garden beds, into your compost pile, create a wild corner where you're going to dedicate it to leaving some leaves, because that becomes really important habitat. So the other thing I want to point out is if you are going to leave leaves and then mow them, do it quickly because there are going to be a lot of butterflies, caterpillars, or other wildlife that are already starting to use those leaves as habitat. So you want to be mindful of keeping some whole leaves that you aren't going to chop up and maybe just put them into a no-mow area. Okay, so we have a lot of species, and I can't dwell on it too long, but I just take my word for it. A lot of species actually using that leaf litter as habitat. So we've got salamanders, amphibians like frogs and salamanders, frogs actually estivating in leaf litter there, bats hibernating in leaf litter, eastern red bats. And we have other examples that are known, like fireflies actually overwinter in leaf litter, the firefly larvae. So again, if you want fireflies, you need to have some leaf litter patches. And people don't think about where they go. You know, when they're not, when the adults aren't out blinking and mating, where do they go? They're somewhere. They're living out their life cycle in your leaf litter or the logs that you leave out there. So it's important to consider it as habitat. So finally, just a few tips on watering wisely. Fall is going to be your drought recovery time and reseeding time. You really only need to irrigate during that period of lawn establishment. Otherwise, get comfortable with allowing your healthy turf to go dormant and don't allow that irrigation water to run off site. Make sure that you're inspecting irrigation systems, doing those checkups and repairs. You wanted to mention something about winterizing your irrigation system
Well,
in fall.
if you do have an irrigation
If you
system,
have one, yeah.
right.
If you have sprinklers, irrigation.
Just blow air through them so that you can blow the water out so that they won't freeze and crack. But again, there's a picture here of testing, for soil moisture. You can use a regular screwdriver or you can use, a stick or something. But, again, that's measuring how effective you are when you do water to make sure that the water does go down through and is watered deeply.
And it's not just running off
Right.
into the local creeks, right? Okay, so if you looking for signs of when is it time to water, you look for footprinting, wilting, a color change in the grass. Those are all indicators that it is time to water. And some just tips on drought tolerant lawns before we wrap up. So think about considering those drought tolerant grasses. That includes that tall fescue from Maryland, but also some of the natives that we covered. Leaving those grass clippings to add organic matter. Consider those tall grass, prairie grasses with deep root systems. Trees also help increase soil moisture with their deep roots. Native planting beds upslope and interspersed with your lawn to improve that water infiltration throughout the yard could be a great strategy. Mowing less and mowing smart to encourage deeper root growth and create those beneficial insect refugia. We gave you a few examples of that, and there are lots more, but think about your lawn as an ecosystem and insect refugia rather than a battleground. And we could have a lot of improvements for biodiversity. So here are just a few sustainable lawn care resources that we would recommend. Of course, we're always going to make a pitch for the new Maryland Master Gardener Handbook. Also, the 8 Essential Elements of Conservation Landscaping has lots of great content. We have an organic lawn care page, and we're doing lots of updates. Mary's working with all of our turfgrass experts to update our website with sustainable lawn care content. And there's a good link on turfgrass removal. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat box for you. Lots of tips on if you want to do some lawn conversion, how to go about that. With that, we would be happy to take questions.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, a lot of ground, covered a lot of turfgrass there.
Awesome. That was a lot of really good content, and accordingly, we have a lot of really good questions.
Okay. Steph, would you like to relay questions to us?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so first couple questions are related to controlling some of the weeds that we talked about. We've got 2 questions about Fiesta in particular, and folks want to know if it would work on nut sedges and oat grass.
So
Mm,
remember I said it wasn't good on grasses? Yeah,
mhm.
it doesn't work on nutsedge and not so much on the grassy weeds. So that is a drawback to that product, but it does pretty well on the broadleaves. So those other weeds, you're going to have to figure out another management strategy. And on nutsedge, unfortunately, you may have to use a conventional pesticide if you're not willing to smother it or if you're not willing to, continually pull it because it has that reserve of those little, propagules.
Mm, yeah. Thank you. Great question.
Yep. Um, I think this is a good question. Another way at sort of battling these invasives, what will help battle crabgrass so that grass can be planted?
Well, that's crabgrass is a great example of a weed that can be just controlled by proper maintenance.
Mm,
So mowing high is the number one, thing. The other thing is to maintain a thick, cover. So crabgrass doesn't compete with either, shade or the shading of taller grass around it, and it doesn't compete if it's actually got competition. So where you get crabgrass is where you mow low and you actually then have or if you have poor turf and you have open areas, it's going to fill in those areas. So just maintaining or fixing your lawn, either overseeding to increase the turf density and then fertilizing correctly, and then mowing high, and that controls a lot of the crabgrass problems.
Awesome.
super. Great tips.
Okay, so I love this question. Are all grubs bad, such as ones for ground beetles, fireflies, etc.?
Oh,
No, of course not. No,
I
of
don't
course not. No.
know.
So again, the grubs that get the most publicity are the things like Japanese beetles or Oriental chafer and things like that. They feed more on the turf roots. The other grubs, the other immature
Larvae,
forms or
yeah.
larvae of insects actually feed on organic matter. They feed on other things. They're predatory in some cases. And so again, those are very good differences or big differences between all those different, species. So
And they may be, people may confuse, pest grubs with things that are like native ground nesting bees or,
yeah.
other larvae of really important beneficial insects. And so if we can, you know, try to make peace with the fact that, there is life in our lawns. And these can be places that we nurture for nurturing the food web, and our native biodiversity. That's a really, really great step forward.
So if you do need to have them identified, there are resources online and so forth. Again, sending in pictures sometimes is not always helpful because we don't always get the identification characteristics that we need. But just making yourself aware that there are so many other insect larvae out there that may, be confused.
Yeah. That aren't doing any damage at all
Right.
and they're actually beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that question. So thank you, Rick, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on using creeping thyme for a long replacement? Can you talk about advantages or disadvantages? Is it better than a fescue? And are there any examples that you have seen in Maryland?
Haven't seen it as a complete lawn alternative. I've seen it, in areas like between stepping stones and maybe areas around beds and things like that. It's a nice ground cover. A few weeds will grow through it. It doesn't take traffic as well as you might think. So if you have traffic, it will sort of break down. But again, in a distinct area, in a small area where you're, looking for ground cover, it covers the soil. It protects the soil. It's a different kind of look. Yeah.
I've seen examples of it used like in the house trips, like between the curb and the sidewalk in that
Yeah,
area
it'll
where
it'll
like have
work.
long
It'll
borders.
actually take drought better than most turf and stuff like that, but it's just a little bit different attributes.
Might have some pollinator benefit.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I will say I've seen it in one of my neighbors' houses, and they have it as a ground cover, not as a complete lawn alternative, but it is kind of up front by their little fencing that they use to keep all their plants in place and not flopping on the sidewalk. And it's nice. It doesn't get really crazy. It smells kind of nice. The dogs are very interested in it. So I
I
think,
love it.
but again,
Yeah.
I don't know if like for a full lawn, if it would suffice.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it would be a complete replacement.
Think about in terms of like interesting border options, like you were saying.
Yep. Okay. If you have bees that are settling kind of right in your house, like actually in it or somewhere really close to it, and you've got a family member who might be allergic to bee stings, what are your suggestions for that situation?
Well, bees require, depending which ones they are. If they're solitary bees, they're not going to sting you,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's a whole different category. They're not
Mhm.
going to bother you. They're not going to cause an allergic reaction because they're just not going to bother with you. If you have things like honeybees or wasps or yellow jackets or other types of things that get confused with bees,
Mhm.
then it's a different story.
Right.
Yeah, we have a resource about that very topic on the extension website. Well, first, you want to distinguish, is it a wasp or is it a bee? Because most native bees are not aggressive, and they're probably not the ones that are stinging you during your picnic. Um, I know from personal experience, I was stung on the tongue several times by a yellow jacket that was nesting in the wall of our house near the patio. So I had to research all of this. That's extremely painful, but it was definitely turned out to be a wasp. And what we are recommending is over the winter or in the fall, plug that hole, close off access. But you don't have to go after every carpenter bee, every solitary bee. There are bees that nest in wood or in masonry, and those are not likely the ones that are stinging you at your picnic or on your patio. And, I say this with great caution because as a person who is allergic to bees and wasps and I have spent some time in the emergency room, you do need to be cautious.
Mhm.
But I am not one bit concerned about the carpenter mason bees, the mining bees. It's really the wasps that are tend to be more aggressive and you have to watch out for. But just keep in mind as well, wasps also have their place in the ecosystem. So we don't want to go to war with wasps, but if it's right near where you eat and really creating a nuisance, creating hazard, then plugging up those nesting chambers in the late fall, winter to deter them from returning is probably the best solution.
Agreed. Okay.
And carry an
Um,
EpiPen. Please carry an EpiPen if you're allergic.
yep. Okay, so Stacey, I know you answered the question that we had about whether or not the landscaping fabric deteriorates, but sh someone else is asking, besides paper landscape fabric, what other natural fabric have you tried in the garden?
Personally, I've used the paper landscape and the coir, which is like coconut fiber fabric, loosely woven. It's worked beautifully, but particularly where you want to control erosion. So it's used a lot in restoration projects, living shoreline projects, erosion control projects. So there's different width of tightness of weave. So looking at the coir fabric, that's kind of like an industry standard. Um, I have not used other kinds of landscape fabric. I have the plastic landscape fabric is a total nightmare that is like legacy from the legacy landscaping. So with my experience, it's actually resulted in root rot in a really beautiful red maple that had to be taken down because we could not get it all up. So it ends up, especially if you got like clay soil that absorbs a lot of water, it's going to impact your evapotranspiration, that whole water gas exchange. So if you're going to put it down as a temporary solution, the plastic landscape fabric, okay, just don't plan to leave it in there. Have you worked with any other landscape fabrics that you could speak to? I talked to a couple of extension agents that were
No,
using
really.
burlap that didn't have a great
Yeah.
experience.
It, it has to either break down or be easily removed, that type of thing. But in the case of the paper and so forth, you could have left it, perhaps. I mean, and that kind of thing. Or if it's a weave that basically is the material that they'll break down. I guess you probably just need to check it after about a year and see how, intact it still is. Hopefully it's something that will break down sort of over time, but I don't have much experience.
I had to change out with a paper landscape fabric after a few floods and windstorms. It was like balling up,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I didn't want to clog my drainage pipe, so I needed something that would be a little more flexible, that I could anchor in there a little better. And so
Yeah.
the core fabric, worked great in that kind of dynamic environment that had water flowing through it. And
Right.
so, yeah, you have to just sort of decide what is appropriate for your situation and experiment a little bit.
Awesome. Okay. Can you grow bottle brush grass in heavy clay soils?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Okay.
know how it goes. So I'm curious to try it too.
So the next question is more grass questions. This participant has 5 foot tall switchgrass. The birds hide in it. They like the seeds in the winter. How much should they leave above the ground when they trim it in the spring? And they've got muley grass as well. And they're wondering how high should that be trimmed and when should it be trimmed?
So the bunch grasses really have a nice crown to them. They have a nice area around the base of the plant. So I wouldn't go into that area. I would maintain them, above that, somewhere around 18 inches, 12 inches at least, but maybe 18 is even better, just to kind of allow also any insects that have overwintered in that crown area a chance to emerge as well. So just stay away from that crown area, which is actually the growing points of the plant.
One thing Sam Droege pointed out at the LAR Native Plant Symposium, that people are kind of tying themselves in knots about when to cut the stems back, when to cut the
Yeah.
standing plants back.
I've noticed
And
that.
he said, really, once the seed heads are done, you could go ahead and cut it back because the insects aren't going to use those stems until there's a hollow stem to be used. They're not going to burrow into the full stem. So you can cut back pretty much at any time after the fall. It's in the spring that they're going to use those hollow stems, and you'll just want to leave those
Well, that's for the
cut
grasses,
stems.
yeah,
Yeah.
but still, I would just protect the crowns. Don't go so low that you're going to cut into the crown of the grasses.
You mean like the root
That root
crown?
area, yeah, where it's
So
where it's
protect the root crown.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I would stay above that.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, and we've got one more question. Oh, another one just came in. Okay, first, what about damage to insects by mowing the leaves?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we
That's what
talked
we're
a little
talking
bit
about.
about
Yeah.
that. Is if you're going to mow them as they fall. Don't wait, and because then that's more time for insects to colonize those leaves, or move them, to an area you are going to allow, them to sort of rest and decompose on their own, and then insects can make a harborage out of that. So again, just don't leave them in an area. If you're going to leave them, but just don't be mowing, after like, a couple weeks or something like that. Mow them as they fall so that you keep up with them and also that you're not as damaging to the overwintering insects.
Got it.
Yeah. And just remember, it's not an all or nothing strategy. You can rake some into the beds. Um, you could mow some, but again, you know, like Dave said, just mow it as it falls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you've let it stay there, it's become habitat.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so the last question that snuck in here. Okay, now we've got a couple more. What plants could be used for shade that are walkable and also evergreen?
Isn't that your question, Steph?
I'm gonna go get the link to the ground covers page.
Yeah, we have a ground covers page.
I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
There are lots of choices actually.
Put that.
Walkable, you said walkable and evergreen. Um, I just want to give a shout out to mosses. We forgot to mention mosses
I love them so much.
and stop doing battle with mosses so that you can really finding ways to incorporate mosses into your landscape. They have water retention value, they have habitat value. There are birds that depend on mosses for their nests. They use moss in their nests. Um, and so, they're often going to be growing in areas that are shady or acidic, so it does have to do with the conditions. But if we can help people make peace with moss instead of doing battle, they're really, really incredible organisms.
Absolutely. All right, so we've actually got two leaf questions that came in at the last minute here. How deep can you pile leaves near a tree?
Actually, in the forest, you see this quite a bit. I mean, you can pile them up because leaves will collapse. A lot of that initial leaf fall has a lot of airspace. And again, that makes for good overwintering and other habitat. But as they degrade, as they compost, naturally, they're going to actually reduce in depth. And so, really, I don't think. I guess I wouldn't pile them up. Like if you rake your whole lawn and put it underneath the tree, it might be a thing. But I mean, actually a foot, 18 inches of leaves are going to actually crush down to almost nothing.
It's true. Mine are
Yeah,
almost gone in the
yeah,
spring, just
yeah.
from the breakdown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they basically do their own thing.
Okay, so related to that, though, we did have one person who says that the leaves they collected from their oak trees last year still haven't decomposed.
Yeah, they're tougher. Yeah,
Yeah,
oaks
so
are
they're
tougher.
hoping to leave them, but they're worried about the leaves, keeping water from getting to the roots of the tree. Is there any concern
No,
there?
no, no.
Okay.
I think nature and evolution have really figured this out. Those leaves come off the trees and they're meant to be there and continue to nourish the tree. Um, and also blow around. The leaf litter also, I didn't mention this, becomes places that wildlife cache acorns like jays. They cache a lot of acorns in the
Hmm.
leaf litter. That's part of how the oak forest regenerates itself. So I would not get overly worried about how they're breaking down more slowly. It's something that I think is kind of intricately worked out through evolution.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so we did it. Amazing questions, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to ask them and to be here with us today. And Stacy and Dave, can't thank you enough for your expertise in helping us with our sustainable fall lawn care.
Thank you, Steph.
Thanks,
Thanks
thanks.
everybody for showing up today, and we hope to see pictures. Send pictures.